The story you are about to hear is one brought to us by a person who is very close to one of us here at Graveyard Dance. We have managed to talk to several people who have been able to verify most of the events you're about to learn of. Due to some sensitive information later in the story, we've had to change a few of the names and exact locations. You will understand more by the end of the story. We are telling the story in the words of the person who brought it to us. In the mid-1990s, I decided to become a hairdresser. I enrolled at a local beauty college and started my studies. After a few weeks of book studies, they had brought us out to start learning to cut hair on mannequins, and not too long after that, we started working out on the floor on actual customers. Needless to say, I didn't feel ready and was scared to death. I had to do it though, so I went out and sat up my station and waited to be the next one booked with a real customer. As I was waiting, an old elderly lady came walking in slowly and said she just wanted a slight trim and her hair rolled and sat in rollers and combed out. I thought, I can do that! Her hair was as white as snow. She introduced herself as Stella, and she was the nicest, funniest customer I would ever have. Stella was in her mid to late 70s. She could barely walk without a cane or walker. As it turned out, she had a very bad heart and also had some breathing issues. She had also been diagnosed recently with cancer, and the doctors only gave her up to a year to live. Despite her grim prognosis, she was always upbeat and funny and could tell more dirty jokes than any sailor I had ever seen. She loved my work, and soon, she started coming in roughly about every 3 days for a shampoo and set. I think it was more of a thing that she was lonely and had obviously just wanted someone to talk to and spend time socializing with. I didn't mind. She always left a good tip. As time went on, her tips started to become bigger and bigger, and soon, it would really start to make me slightly uncomfortable. She came in and asked me if I could cut pet hair as well as I did humans. She wanted me to come over and trim her dog's hair. As it turned out, I knew how to do this because I always did my own dog grooming at home, so I told her I would. Since she had always tipped so well, I told her I would do it for free. I didn't want to feel like I was taking advantage of the sweet lady. The day came to go over to her place and my car wouldn't start. I had a mechanic come look at it, and the car had a blown engine. I had let it get too hot trying to get it home the previous day. I called her and told her why I couldn't make it. You could imagine my surprise when she came by with a set of keys to a new car. It wasn't brand new, but it was new to me. I was floored. I didn't know what to say. I tried to explain to her that it was too much, and she said that it was her late husband's and that she didn't need it and that it was just sitting there not being used. So I ended up thanking her and told her that I would pay her back. She told me that if I wanted to pay her back, that I could do so by just simply driving her to her doctor's appointments. Needless to say, I graciously accepted, and so from then on, a few times a week, I would drive her to her appointments, which led to taking her to her favorite coffee shops, her grocery shopping, and anything else she needed. We became very good friends, but Stella had a way of driving me crazy at times too. She would have this strange habit of going to one store for bread, another for meats and vegetables. She would go to one coffee shop to have coffee and another restaurant to eat, so our days would go on and on. I tried to gently explain to her that there were some days I needed to be at school or with my son, but Stella was very stubborn. It's almost as if you were talking to a wall sometimes. Still, I didn't want to seem ungrateful. So, I took her everywhere she needed to go. I also went to her house to groom her dog. Turns out she had 7 or 8. She also had several cats. She lived in an old dilapidated farmhouse that looked like it would just fall over with the first windstorm that came along. It was so old, it was literally leaning to one side. Outside, there was tons of old junk and scrap salvage cars and trucks. Out back there was an old in-ground pool that had a crack down the middle with weeds and grass growing all around it, making it a very bad danger for anyone walking around it. Inside was even worse. She had lived in the home all her adult life, and I don't think she even owned a trash can. In the house was everything she had ever gotten for at least the last 50 years. She never threw anything away, as in ever. Every piece of mail, every magazine she had ever owned, every butter bowl she had ever bought and reused, it was there. Things were so cluttered they were stacked to the ceiling. It was the worst case of hoarding that I had ever seen in my life. It was simply unreal. The floor was so dirty that it had a foot of shed dog hair on it. You couldn't even see the color of the carpet. Fleas were eating me alive. It couldn't be healthy, so I offered to help her get it cleaned up. She refused to get rid of anything though. So I swept the floor and groomed her dogs and bought them some flea medicine and tried to do what I could to get rid of the fleas in the home. They were so bad that her dogs looked like they were bleeding from open wounds when I ran water over them to bathe them. I felt bad for them, so I started going over, weekly to clean. As the months wore on, Stella's health started to really go downhill. Her doctors explained that she was going to need 24/7 care and could not live alone any longer. If she didn't have a friend or relative, she would have to be placed in a nursing home. She started to cry and said she couldn't go because of her pets. I had a larger home with plenty of room, so I agreed to take her in and get her room done up for her. At this point, she knew she had maybe weeks at best. She had lost lots of weight and was wheelchair bound by now. She told me she had wanted me to give her all her stuff because all of her other friends had been greedy and had taken advantage of her. They would come by and raid her late husband's tools and never ask. They would all demand her jewelry when she died. The funny thing was, she claimed they thought that it was real. She had several necklaces and rings with diamonds in them, and her friends were all clamoring over who was going to get what. They thought that they were worth a lot, and Stella never told them otherwise. She explained that they were just old costume jewelry and that she was enjoying watching them all go into a frenzy over it. She told me that when she died, she wanted me to be the executor of the estate and that she have a big favor to ask. She wanted me to make certain that the rings and jewelry were to be put on her and lowered down in the casket with her and buried with them watching. She also wanted to be sure that I stayed and watched them cover the casket so that no one could rob her. I laughed and gladly agreed. She was old, but she was a feisty, spunky old gal. I loved that mischievousness. I did tell her that I wasn't comfortable taking anything for it though. I told her, if you want to give it to someone, why not sell it all and donate it to a charity of her choice? She loved that idea. She called a local antique dealer and sold him everything in the house. She explained that he could take what he wanted and when he was done picking through, to let me know, and she would have me figure out what to do with the rest of it, so he came and took everything he thought he could sell. What was left was basically just dog hair, old trash and dog feces. She wanted me to handle selling her house for her, so I agreed. I took some friends over and we decided to use the old abandoned pool out back as a giant burn pit for trash. When we got done, we'd simply bring out a load of filled dirt and bury it so no one would ever get hurt by falling at it. We worked for nearly a week by finally managed to get all the trash out there burned. We filled it over with dirt and had a neighbor bring his tractor over and fill it all in. Just as we were finishing, I realized that we had forgot one piece to add to the trash, an old sun-faded red couch that had been rained on, sun-faded and peed on so many times by the dogs and cats that it had turned a milky pink color. To add to how dirty it was full of holes with the springs hanging out of it from where the dogs chewed holes in it. We decided to carry it out there and dig a hole in the fresh dirt and set it ablaze. We didn't figure we'd come out in a day or two and fill it back in. We were exhausted and dirty and just wanted to go home and rest and shower. Stella by now was in the hospital again and getting weaker by the day. I went in the next day to tell her it was all taken care of and that a buyer would soon be coming to look at the house. She was happy to hear that. She smiled weakly and asked me, "Where did you put my old red couch?" I said what couch, and all of a sudden it dawned on me what she was talking about. I explained to her that it couldn't be saved and that it had went in the burn pit. Her eyes got huge and she exploded. "You did what? How could you do that? What have you done? How dare you?" She was absolutely furious. It was the first time I had ever seen her angry. Before this day, I could do no wrong in her eyes. She always treated me like I was a godsend, and then today, this? I couldn't understand why, but I tried to calm her down, to no avail. She wasn't having it. The doctors came in and asked me to leave, so I did. It saddened me that I had made her so upset. I was just trying to help. I had no idea why that dirty old raggy couch was so special. I began to think maybe it was sentimental or something. I had every intention of talking to her about it, but she died just 2 days later before I could get back to see her. I made sure and fulfill all my promises I had made to her though. I made sure she was buried the way she wanted, in the clothing she had picked out and with her rings and necklaces in sight. As she predicted, her so-called friends showed up and stared at her casket as it went down. Needless to say, they were fuming over it. By now, there's something I forgot to mention. As I said before, she was a prankster. Always had this devilish laugh and wicked sense of humor. When she would talk about dying, she would always laugh and tell me that when she did, that she would be back to haunt me. I was always just like, "Yeah, Stella, sure you are." I didn't believe in ghosts, so I wasn't too worried about it. That is, till the following year. Stella died in '95. She passed away just a week shy of Halloween, which was her favorite holiday. The following year, on the anniversary of her death, I had planned on stopping by the graveyard and putting out some fresh flowers as I have done once a month since she has passed. I live just 3 blocks from where she is buried, so it's never a problem. I planned on doing it after picking up my son's Halloween costume that day. You can imagine my surprise when I walk into my kitchen and look up from my coffee and there stood Stella. I don't mean a see-through ghost thing. It was as if it was real-life Stella, flesh and blood, as in you could reach out and touch her. Standing there with her burial outfit on with her rings and necklaces, as clean as the day she was buried. As always, she was laughing and smiling. The first word she spoke was, "I told you I'd haunt you." I started to stutter and stammer, "Wah, what the hell?" I blurted out in shocked horror, "You're not real. You can't be. What the actual hell?" She laughed and assured me she was. I just kept denying it. I said, "If you're real, prove to me that you're real." What I meant was, pinch me or touch my arm so I could feel it kind of thing. What she did next, definitely made me a believer in the paranormal and the existence of ghosts. She smiled and said, "Before I died, do you remember me getting upset over you burning my couch?" I said yeah, but I didn't want to upset you more by talking about it. She explained that she didn't trust banks and that when I had burned that old couch, that I had accidentally burned her life savings. Several $100,000s. My jaw at this point was about to hit the floor. She said, "Go out tomorrow and dig through the ashes, you'll see." I blinked and when I opened my eyes and looked up, she was gone. I didn't even wait. I jumped in the car and went straight there. The person who bought the place lived out of state and was planning on tearing down the old farmhouse and building a new one, but again, he was out of state. So I drove up and started scratching around until I found one of the unburned arms of the couch that hadn't quite fully went up in the flames. I started scratching around in the ashes of it and sure enough, I found 3 $100 bills burned in half. Before she vanished, she said the reason she got so upset was that she had planned on having me put it in a trust for my son. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I was more horrified that I had been visited by a ghost or that I had literally burned close to $500,000 in cash. After I had some time to think about it though, my son and I both went on and are having great lives. We didn't need the money. It actually brings me comfort to know that there is indeed life on the other side and that she is doing well and reunited with her husband and loved ones. She even got to keep her rings and jewelry. If you like this week's story, share it with a friend on social media. Share it by word of mouth or however you'd like. We appreciate it either way. Till next time!